Hey, life can change in an instant. One minute everything feels normal, and the next someone else's mistake turns your world upside down. That's when you need a team you can count on. NACE Law Group has been standing up for DC families for decades, fighting for neighbors hurt by medical malpractice, wrongful deaths, and serious injuries. They don't just settle quickly or push papers, they dig in, fight hard, and make sure every client gets the justice they deserve. And here's something we love. They're a longtime supporter of CityCast because just like us, they care about this community and the people who call it home. So if you've been hurt, or someone you care about has, pick up the phone. Call NACE Law Group. They'll stand with you, fight for your family, and make sure your rights are protected. Visit WashingtonDCInjuryLawyers.com. That's WashingtonDCInjuryLawyers.com. And from United Healthcare, with a network of over 120 hospitals and nearly 40,000 physicians across the DC region, United Healthcare is proud to provide the care you need when you need it. That's why United Healthcare has been working to make the healthcare system work better for you, making your care more coordinated, more personal, and easier to access. At United Healthcare, your care is non-negotiable. Learn more at uhc.com/Hopkins/FAQs.
Today on CityCast DC, DC announced the city has $30 million in local funds that could be used to cover November food benefits for low-income residents. Marissa Lang has been covering food assistance programs for The Washington Post. She explains what all of this means for the district and why it matters for everyone, even if you're not on SNAP. Today's Tuesday, November 4th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. Marissa, thanks for being here. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
So how many folks in the DC area are relying on SNAP right now? I know it was paused for a little bit.
Yeah, so about 1.6 million people in the region, that includes the district, Maryland, and parts of Virginia, are enrolled in the SNAP program and rely on it for food for their families.
Who in the district is eligible to be on SNAP?
So folks who are eligible to be on SNAP are low-income families. You need to qualify with this federal program. Think of kids who receive free and reduced lunch at school. There are eligibility requirements based on income levels and also family size. But these are folks basically who, based on what they make in a given month, can't afford to pay all their bills, feed their families, and just make ends meet month to month.
So obviously we're now talking about the shutdown and how SNAP benefits are being paused during the shutdown. I was trying to think back through past shutdowns, and I can't recall in previous shutdowns SNAP ever being paused. Has that happened?
My memory is that in the last shutdown, which was during President Trump's first term, SNAP benefits were not allowed to expire. And part of that is because there are these emergency funds that can sustain the program during emergencies, like a federal shutdown, like some sort of gap in funding. And I believe in the past, that is what was tapped into to prevent exactly this sort of pause or break or discontinuation of benefits.
Okay, so then why is the conversation so different this time around? Like, why are SNAP benefits being potentially paused during this shutdown?
So the Trump administration refused initially to activate those emergency funds. Over the weekend, a judge ordered that the Trump administration would have to. So now we're seeing the news come out that benefits will have to be continued during the government shutdown, whether or not there is this contemporaneous funding happening. But the problem is there's no real clear timeline on when that funding might resume. So it doesn't mean that because this judge ruled that must happen at the end of October, that now, starting early November, people are automatically going to get their SNAP benefits. There might actually be a disruption for a lot of families, particularly in the first few weeks of November, depending on how long the shutdown lasts.
I just want to be clear. I've seen folks say online and some reporting that phrases this or frames this as, SNAP programs are, quote, running out of money. They're out of money. that's not technically true because there is this emergency funding. Do I have that right?
That's exactly right. And there are some states that are taking matters into their own hands and that are not waiting for the Trump administration or for the federal government to fund some of this. So, for example, in Virginia, the governor declared a state of emergency that allows him to use state dollars to help fill in the gap towards SNAP. So he's tapping into some state tax dollars to kind of enact this stopgap measure to make sure that Virginians who are on SNAP do not have a disruption of services.
Stories matter at St. Anne's Center, where mothers and children overcome homelessness and write hopeful new futures. Founded in D.C. in 1860 and chartered by President Lincoln, St. Anne's Center continues to help women and their children today, 165 years on. And now, we invite you to experience our story in person. Join us for the film In Her Words on November 4th, which will also include a panel discussion on motherhood, homelessness, and hope. The film highlights 4 young women currently progressing through St. Anne's. Hear their stories in their words. This free event takes place this Tuesday from 7 to 9 p.m. at the gorgeous Nolan Center for Performing Arts at Georgetown Visitation Preparatory School. Come for the powerful storytelling, stay for the social impact networking reception with your neighbors and fellow changemakers. This event is free, but you must RSVP at stanns.org.
And from United Healthcare. At United Healthcare, your access to care is non-negotiable. With a network of more than 120 hospitals and nearly 40,000 physicians across the D.C. region, United Healthcare is proud to provide you the care you deserve. With open enrollment season here, you can trust that United Healthcare is working to ensure you can access the care you need, when you need, where you need it. Learn more about United Healthcare's commitment to patients at uhc.com/Hopkins/FAQs. And from United Healthcare. At United Healthcare, your access to care is non-negotiable. With a network of more than 120 hospitals and nearly 40,000 physicians across the D.C. region, United Healthcare is proud to provide you the care you deserve. With open enrollment season here, you can trust that United Healthcare is working to ensure that you can access the care you need, when you need, where you need it. Learn more about United Healthcare's commitment to patients at uhc.com/Hopkins/FAQs.
Do you have a sense of what the current plan is with the Bowser administration here in D.C.? Like, how are they doing anything to make sure that their residents who are on SNAP are not going to experience a disruption in services?
So last we heard from the Bowser administration and from the D.C. Council, there's about $30 million that would be needed to keep SNAP going. And the mayor's office and the D.C. Council, we spoke to D.C. Council member Christina Henderson. They said they would probably look into funding WIC, which is a different program. It's a supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children, which was expected to lose funding by November 7th. So that's like primarily a program used to give help to new mothers. It provides baby formula. It helps feed like kids with special needs, things like that. There's about 500 families in DC that rely on that program. And they were looking into funding that specifically, but they were not committing to funding SNAP or providing that $30 million needed to keep it going.
Wow. So what's going to happen to folks who need those services?
Yeah, that is the looming question. It's pretty severe, the cliff of drop off for most families. You know, they rely on this program to provide meals and to go shopping. The way SNAP works is it's like a debit card. And so you can actually go into a supermarket and buy food for your family. There are, lists of foods that are approved and not approved, but it's not like a food bank where you go and pick up like a pre-sorted box of food in some cases. People are empowered through SNAP to go shopping and to buy what they need for their families with those benefits. A lot of those folks we're expecting will start to turn instead to food banks and other programs intended to, give donated food or household items to families to try to fill in the gaps. But the reality is it's just not a one-for-one kind of ratio.
Yeah, and I get the sense that the food bank scene in DC is already a little bit stressed. So just expecting those people who needed that kind of support to just be accommodated by food banks might not be something that actually works out in practice.
For sure. I mean, I talked to a number of food banks in the DC area, including the Capital Area Food Bank, which is probably the biggest one that Washingtonians know. And they said that there's more than 400,000 families who they expect will have their benefits interrupted and might now turn to food banks to try to help. But that is a compounding issue, right? These are also adding on top of families that are dealing with loss of money because perhaps there's a federal worker who is the breadwinner and they've been furloughed or they're not getting paid. This is also following mass layoffs in the federal government and among government contractors. It's also amid growing inflation where everything is getting more expensive, right? Like anyone who goes to the grocery store knows that prices are going up and wages are not matching that. So the food banks, to your point, are definitely stressed. They've been seeing more and more people lean on them to make ends meet before this happened. So the Capital Area Food Bank, which, as I said, services the district and parts of Northern Virginia and Maryland, told me that actually since the beginning of this year, since the beginning of 2025, they have doled out up to 7 million more meals than usual, which is like above and beyond its typical distribution. And that's largely because of laid off federal workers and people whose paychecks have been impacted by the government shutdown and other disruption of government services.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that because I think it really helps paint a portrait. I don't know that we're really dealing with this so much in DC, but when I look at the conversation around things like SNAP and WIC, I do want to remind folks that even though there might be this, stereotype of somebody who just chooses not to work and is just abusing government handouts, a lot of people who are on benefits like this actually do work. Some folks are disabled or elderly or can't work. And so I always want to take the opportunity to push back on what I think are fictionalizations of your average person who gets benefits like this. And, when you were talking about how programs like WIC work, you can't just walk into the grocery store and get whatever you want. Like anybody who knows anybody who relies on programs like this knows that it is so particular about what you can and cannot purchase at the grocery store. If you have an idea in your head that, low-income moms are just going into Giant and filling up their carts with sushi and whatever else they want, that is a fiction. That is not happening. That is not how these programs work.
Absolutely. And to your point, most of the people on these programs do work. They are just not making enough money to meet all of the needs of their families, which are particular to those families, right? I was on free lunch when I was in public school as a kid. And the purpose of these programs is to allow a family to not have to worry about the very, very basic need of getting food on the table, of feeding their children, so they can put that money toward other things like paying for housing or making sure their car works or paying for medical care, right? There's a lot of other things that are straining families financially right now. And the Capital Area Food Bank, when I talked to them, said that if we're looking at the laid off workers in the region who have been losing jobs with the federal government, with NGOs, government contractors, nonprofits, right? There's been massive layoffs across many industries in the area. 41% of them are folks who struggle to put food on the table and who have been looking for ways to supplement that, either through some federal benefits like SNAP or through food banks.
Absolutely. And again, it's especially here in the district, the conversation is so complex with so many workers, not being paid. It's a bad situation. And I'm quite concerned that it's going to go from bad to worse if residents are seeing disruption in these services.
Yeah, you're not the only one. I think everyone is sort of bracing to see how bad it could get depending on how long this interruption lasts. And then also, depending on how long the government shutdown goes for, there are going to be more and more people who need services. If you're not getting paid for 2 weeks, maybe you have enough savings to weather that. But if you're not getting paid for 2 months or longer, that's a totally different calculus for most families.
And it's a good reminder that you might be thinking, oh, well, I'll never be in a position to need services like this. I can speak for myself that I think any of us is only a few missed paychecks away from being like, oh no, I am in a situation where I'm going to need support.
Absolutely, because there's only so long you can defer bills, right? Like if you're paying a mortgage or you're paying rent and all of a sudden your paycheck goes away, that amount that maybe you have saved for emergencies is going to start to dry up really, really quickly. And then you start doing the math of, okay, what can I live without? And for a lot of families, the what can I live without might be, well, I could skip a meal, right? Or I don't have to do this thing that I would normally do for myself.
Let me ask you this. I'm not sure if this is a question that you can answer, but I'm wondering, do you have any sense of how this will impact the experience of going food shopping or going to the grocery store more broadly? Like, if people aren't getting the food benefits they would otherwise use to go to grocery stores and do their shopping for the family for the week, what's that going to do to prices? Like, is there any sense of how this is going to impact availability and prices of grocery stores more broadly in DC?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I don't know that we know enough yet to predict that. I do think that the pricing of, foods and agriculture and all of that is a really complex web of things that is not necessarily always tied to consumer demand. So I'm not sure that low income folks who might feel less equipped to go shopping for certain things will immediately impact the pricing, but I definitely think it's something we should be looking out for. The other thing is a lot of retailers will be donating food to some of these food banks and stuff. So I think it's interesting to kind of see the ways in which the donation network is impacted, right? Like to see how some of that continuation of donations might be affected by people spending money or not spending money in some of the places that on the back end are also providing food to needy folks.
Yeah, you mentioned that we don't really know how this might impact kind of things like grocery prices. It seems to me there's a lot of things that we know here and a lot of things that we just don't know that are kind of wait and see. What are some of those things?
For sure. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns. Some of those unknowns are exactly how much of a disruption area families are going to see from this benefit interruption. We don't know if it means that they're going to be losing out on perhaps a week, like if there's going to be a week delay or much, much longer before they start to see some of those emergency benefits roll in. We don't know how long this government shutdown is going to last. Certainly, as of today, you and I are talking, there's been no meaningful progress toward a solution, toward a compromise. We also don't know how long some emergency sort of supplemental actors like food banks or like other nonprofits that step in to help people in times of crisis are going to be able to shoulder that need. Capital Area Food Bank, which is, like I said, one of the biggest providers in the region. It's super well known. It's very well funded. They have a lot of very big donors that help sustain their services. And they have been telling me that, they're not even getting enough food. And they've been having to go out and buy food to help provide to the families that rely on food bank services to make ends meet. So they're not getting enough in-kind donations from retailers, from individuals, from people who donate food. They've actually been having to go out and purchase some and purchase quite a bit more this year than usual because of the increased need. So yeah, there's a lot of unknowns. And I think a lot of it is a question of time and how long all of this lasts. It seems like after the judge ordered that they tap into these emergency benefits, it seemed likely that that was going to happen. But it is an open question of how long it will take for them to get those emergency funds online, how long it will take to sort of trickle down to folks who have a SNAP card. So I'm not sure yet what the long-term outlook is. And I also don't know, right, like the degree to which this particular issue is motivating enough for lawmakers to come back to the table and reach a deal. And I wonder how many more crises we will start to see because of this government shutdown. And you know, at what point will that be enough to kind of facilitate a deal? Last time during the big government shutdown in Trump's first term, if memory serves, it was also during hurricane season, not unlike now. And some of the concerns were not just around, people putting food on the table, but emergency services in response to disasters.
That's such a good point. And it's hard for me to think of anything more urgent than hunger. I mean, humans need food to stay alive. Yeah, in my book, it doesn't get much more urgent than the need for food.
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, most people objectively would agree with you that people going hungry is a capital E emergency, especially when you start to think about people with kids and families and all of that. But yeah, it is sort of wild to see the juxtaposition of headlines saying SNAP benefits are disappearing, hungry families are panicking, food banks are trying to shore up as much as they can to help people. And then also there's no end in sight to the shutdown, and there's no compromise, and there's no one kind of moving that needle. So it does beg the question of at what point it gets to the place where people are willing to talk.
So are there ways that folks can help those who might be in need? Should folks be donating to food banks? Should they be giving food to food banks? What should people be doing if they want to support?
Yeah, I would say those are both really good options. I've seen several food drives, even just in my community, in my neighborhood, and the places I frequent. So I think if you're able to, share a little bit this season, definitely donating food. I know nonprofits like the Capital Area Food Bank have helpful lists of items that they are accepting. A lot of non-perishables, right? Like canned food or shelf-stable food are things that are definitely needed. But also if you just want to donate money, monetary donations help nonprofits like food banks go out and purchase items and purchase food and purchase things perhaps at like lower price points than what you might get if you're just going to the supermarket to get a can of tuna fish, and they can use that to feed more families as well. So I would definitely look into whatever your local food banks are, whatever your local nonprofits are. If you have, in-kind donations, material donations that you can give folks, but also to remember that food is not the only thing people might be needing at this point, the time of year. I always try to go through my closet and purge when seasons change, right? And if I can donate clothes that might help families say, okay, I don't need to spend that money on a winter coat and I can go feed my family instead. I think anything at this point helps when people are doing that kind of math of like, what is a necessity and what do I have enough money for?
That's such a good reminder. One of the other questions I wanted to ask you, again, I don't know if this is something that you can speak to, but I'm curious, we have an election coming up in Virginia, one of the biggest races, a race that a lot of folks are watching. We're certainly watching it here at CityCast. I'm wondering if there's a sense that maybe elected officials are going to kind of keep an eye on this Virginia race to use that to say whether or not this is sort of hitting with voters. If they're, if Dems win big in Virginia, maybe lawmakers are thinking, oh, our messaging is not really working. We really need to come to the table on this. But if they don't win big, maybe Republican leaders are thinking, oh, well, this isn't really hitting. This isn't really like resonating with voters. Do you have any sense of that?
It's definitely shaping up to be one of, I would say, many issues in the Virginia race. As you mentioned, it's a really watched election. It's going to, I think, be very meaningful depending on who pulls out in that election this week. But it's already been, SNAP, I should say, has already been a little bit of a issue that has been volleyed back and forth. When Governor Youngkin announced that he was going to be tapping into state benefits to keep SNAP afloat, he didn't waste any time in blaming the Democrats for the crisis, right? He said that he refuses to let Virginians go hungry and blamed that issue and said that this was being used as leverage by congressional Democrats. And then meanwhile, state Democrats in Virginia have been accusing the governor of using this all as leverage and as political posturing, and saying that even though the governor tapped into state money to keep the program afloat, that he's actually not providing any plan or leadership or any extra coordination with Virginia families, and they are asking for more. So it's definitely politically charged, and it's definitely an issue where I think both locally and nationally, you are seeing a lot of finger pointing, and you're seeing a lot of people on both the GOP side and the Democrat side blaming the other for how we got here.
And then when you go to government websites, you get those pop-ups that pretty explicitly blame Democrats. Just to give you a sense of what you've just laid out, Marissa, just how sort of politically charged this issue has become. And again, hungry bellies are nonpartisan. People need food.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, the Trump administration has absolutely plastered government websites with messaging basically saying that, if you're experiencing an interruption in services, or if you can't reach folks with the housing administration or whichever agency you're trying to reach, that it is Democrats' fault. This, a lot of folks have said, is a violation of the Hatch Act, which is a law that says that if you work for a federal agency, if you're using federal dollars, you cannot use taxpayer money to advocate for a political position or to, take a side, so to speak. But nonetheless, you're right. Those messages are all over the place. I've seen them myself. Hunger is a thing that is sort of a silent, hard to notice issue a lot of the time. You can't always look at someone and know if or the degree to which they're struggling to do something as simple as putting food on the table. So I would just encourage everyone. We are getting into the holiday season, which I know people are often inspired during to give a little bit more and to help a little bit more. But if people are able, if your family has been lucky enough to not be impacted by the many compounding emergencies facing folks in this region, I do think it's a really important time to try to help in ways big and small, because you don't always know who in your own community is struggling.
I'm so glad you added that, Marissa. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your coverage on this issue.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Bridget.
Likewise. And thank you to our newest CityCast DC neighbor, Joseph K. If you want to become a neighbor too, just go to membership.citycast.fm. That is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.